So I wanted to jump in and just talk about the shooting which has occurred in Minneapolis, Minnesota today. I'm going to talk about the event in a few moments, but I want to share about why I wanted to come in and talk is that I'm the dad of a son who just turned 12 at the weekend, and my eldest is about to turn 14. And I'm deeply saddened by yet another tragic shooting at a school. This time it's very close to home to me. Minneapolis, Minnesota is where I reside. So just want to initially start with my prayers for the family and all those involved. Again, as a dad of two sons, I can't imagine what that phone call would be like to say something had happened to my sons. But I want to talk, just start off really. So when I wrote my book, How to Survive a Mass Shooting, it came out only 3 weeks ago. I wrote a line in there and I said, Jesus wept. Now, you could be thinking, Simon, don't get all Christian faith focused on us. And that's okay. But the reason why I put Jesus wept in the opening to my new book is not only is it the shortest passage in the Bible, but it's one of the times when Jesus showed true emotion. And when I was talking about how to survive a mass shooter, it seemed to be fitting to open with that paragraph. So if you're a person of faith, Jesus wept, and if you're not, please be with us for those that are, because this is another tragic event. So I want to just talk a little bit, because you might not know what has happened. I've had a lot of phone calls, a lot of text messages from press, reporters, and other people just said, well, what's actually gone on? Because not everyone follows these deadly mass shootings like we do. So Annunciation Catholic School, which serves preschool to 8th grade, they were the victims are so far, which is the biggest school tragedy that Minnesota has ever had. So it's in a town which is just sort of south of Minneapolis. They say Minneapolis, it's sandwiched between Richfield and the town of Minneapolis. So what we know now is that 2 children, 8 and 10, were killed. 14 children and 3 adults have been injured. Some of those have been critically injured. And just want to sort of bounce around a little bit as I sort of talk about what happened here. But when I came back, I was actually at a meeting this morning, I came back and my youngest son, who's 12, the first thing he said to me was, Dad, why do these people do this? And that is a really complex question, but it was a very deep question for my 12-year-old to say, Dad, why does this keep happening? And I wish I had the answer for him, but all we know is that these people seem to choose these open targets, these soft targets, those that have a high body count. So I just wanted to share that. It was a very insightful question from my 12-year-old to say, Dad, why do these things happen? And I'm not sure I really had a good answer for him. So 2 children, 8 and 10 have tragically been killed. 17 others have been seriously injured. So the first reports, as you all know, are never accurate. The first reports, there can often be misinformation, but what I've tried to do is piece together what is known, and then I'm just going to offer some perspective on it. So in Minneapolis, the police chief, O'Hara, he's already done a few news interviews on one of those, and it seems to be pretty much confirmed and agreed upon by most of the news stations. I look for clusters of information when I'm trying to work out what is factual, particularly in those very early times, is that this assailant opened fire from outside the building and was shooting towards children and adults inside that were sat in pews for the morning mass. The assailant, dressed in black clothing, arrived around 15 minutes after the mass. There's some pre-planning which has already been seen. The dark clothing, we see this in a lot of these large-scale attacks. I think it even goes back to Columbine, where the assailants were wearing dark clothing and sort of almost tactical sort of looking vest, even back in that era. So dressed in dark clothing is a bit of a pattern. The Violence Prevention Project, Dr. James Lindsay, Dr. Gillian Peterson, they talk about the 4 things that all these mass shooters generally have in common. One of those is that they go online, they get radicalized in darkest parts of the internet, but they study other mass shooters, right? So they're studying what people are doing. So if they appear to look very similar, If they appear to be the same, it's because they're studying. So the dressed in dark clothing is definitely a pattern we've seen before. Arrived 15 minutes after mass has started. This is what tells me there's pre-planning here, because mass shootings are generally about a math equation at distance over time. Tragically, I have to talk some challenging subjects here, but they want to kill as many people as possible in the short amounts of time with the closest distance to them. So the fact that this assailant arrived 15 minutes after mass indicates to me there was pre-planning, because they knew the time when people were going to be inside worshiping in prayer. They got them at the most vulnerable time. More will come out, I'm sure. I spoke to Dr. James Denz on the phone this morning. There's always these pre-indicators. We'll only know a little bit later as the story unfolds what they were, but I'm very confident that they arrived 50 minutes after the mass was because of the pre-planning. They knew that was going to be the place of mass gathering, so they chose that time. The assailant carried multiple weapons. Again, Chief O'Hara has confirmed this. Many news reports are also confirming this, that the assailant had a rifle, a shotgun, and a pistol. And it appears during this, they most probably at least shot all of those weapons at some point do it. And as I mentioned, prayers and thoughts are with two families, 8 and 10, whose kids aren't coming home, and there's still many others more that have been injured. Similar to the sort of the running trend is the assailant died, appears to be by suicide at the scene. Again, early reports, more information will come out. We did see a little bit of a change in system, if you like, where some of these assailants were either going on the run or were handing themselves in, but most often this is death by suicide. They're not just homicides, they're suicides. So that does sort of follow the pattern as well. And the assailant's vehicle's been left at the scene. So there's going to be a lot of information that's going to come out from social media. Was there a manifesto? What is the motive? What was inside their car? We see that quite often. Something that I wanted to just pick up on, particularly as we talk around, let me go full screen for a second, particularly as we talk about faith organizations, is I think it's something really high. My good friend Carl Chin from the Faith-Based Security Network, he's got a lot of the accurate data on this, but I believe it's somewhere between 60 and 70% at faith organizations. When an incident occurs, it occurs outside the building or in the parking lot. So on this occasion, the assailant fired through the windows when people were in there praying. Particularly now for faith organizations, that follows what the data says, but a lot of these incidents start outside. So just reaffirming then that what is known of the suspect at this time, as I record this, Wednesday, lunchtime, Central Time, not too much is known of him. The suspect was in his 20s. Known not to have an extensive criminal history, so it means that they know who this assailant is. They're not just naming this individual at this time, and there's no known motive as to what was the possible cause. But over the next days and potentially hours, more of that will become known. If it does, I might come in again and just share some more perspective on that. So the shooter died on scene. So let me just go full screen here a second. Let me put this on here, make it a bit bigger for you. What was interesting about this incident is there's been report, and Chief O'Hara, the police chief of Minneapolis, during one of his press conferences, he just said that there was definitely multiples of gunshots been fired. Some witness accounts have said there was upwards of 30, 40, 50. Again, more will come out. But what's been clear about this one is there has been a steady stream of gunfire going towards that building. And again, it started outside. What a lot of people, or one of the questions that Chief O'Hara was asked was there any type of like incendiary device or bomb or explosives? The answer to that seems to be no. However, local neighbors did report seeing some type of red smoke in and around the school and in the street. So more to come as to what that means. That would be slightly different and unusual if someone's used some type of like a flare gun or some type of colored smoke. But this is what neighbors have been reporting. Again, the first report isn't always the most accurate. However, clearly they saw something which was unusual because they've mentioned it and they've told people about this red smoke, which has now been reported. As I mentioned, the Violence Prevention Project, if you're not aware of them, you need to go to the website. For still believe it's theviolenceproject.org. They've researched every mass shooting from 1966 to the current day, a great source of data sets. And what we learn from a lot of these cases is how they operate, how they work. What was really interesting here is that the assailant in some way blocked the door, and the police chief O'Hara says with some type of 2x4. The intent to try and trap people inside so they then can't flee the building to then stay safe. Now, in my days back in the United Kingdom, when the IRA were very prevalent, they used to do secondary devices where they were really the kings of this, where they would have a secondary device, they would divert traffic in a certain direction, but have a secondary device to then try and kill or hurt more people. Interesting here that the assailant with some type of wood, can I imagine it was, has attempted to block at least a couple of those doors were blocked in some way so people couldn't leave that worship area where they were praying for morning mass. Really interesting. And again, the past dictates the future. We saw a little bit of this with Columbine, where propane bombs and booby traps were near doors, more along the lines of what I said with how the IRA used to work in England with sort of secondary device and divert traffic. But we definitely saw this with Virginia Tech, where the gunman chained multiple exits to Norris Hall before they began their shooting spree, so that basically it meant that people couldn't escape, they couldn't stay safe, and they could increase their body count. When I conduct vulnerability assessments at churches and schools, I'm often looking for, do they have those double door handles? Now, we go back to something which is coming up to 20 years old, Virginia Tech, but I'm still saying when we're conducting vulnerability assessments, be mindful of double doors because they have been used as a weakness before. I'm assuming in some way that because this assailant could use some wood to block the doors, there was some type of double door handle on the outside. Again, we've seen this before. If some of these MOs, method of operation, seem familiar, it's because they're going online, they're studying, they're learning, and they're improving. So really interesting piece of that story there, that the gunman in some way tried to prevent people from leaving. What I just want to sort of talk about here, and we go full screen again, just so you can sort of see this is just a reminder as to the type of incident we're talking about here. It can be really hard for me as a security consultant that focuses in safety and security, and I've been doing this all my life. It can be, we can get too normalized by this, and we can't get normalized by these incidents. We can't. There are children as young as 6 that are being treated for gun wounds in hospitals in Minnesota as a result of this incident. So we've really got to make sure that as things go quiet, as the story comes out and 2-3 weeks pass, we've got to really remember this incident. We've got to remember the victims. We've got to remember those that lost their lives. We've got to remember those that are injured. We've got to remember the emergency services that responded. One of my friends is a police chaplain. He's been called to not only help the families, but also help the law enforcement as to what they're seeing. Children as young as 6 were being operated on because of gun shots. That is not okay. That is not okay. So want to leave us with a question. So I've been streaming live here on LinkedIn and on YouTube. The question I have is, what is the common ground? Now, I know people that love their firearms, that do not want to give their firearms up. They believe it's their right to have a firearm in America. And I understand that because they're responsible firearms owners. Then I have friends that are deadly opposed to firearms and that they don't believe that people should have access to some of these assault weapons or some of these high-powered, more military-style guns. They don't believe that a civilian needs that. And I see everything in between. So when I look at these incidents and say, what is the common ground? The common ground is that those respectable members of society that have firearms don't want them to get into the wrong hands, and they don't want to hear that an 8 and 10-year-old have been killed at a school. I think we'd all agree that. And then on the other side, people don't want those guns to get into the wrong hands. So for me, the middle ground is where can we both agree? I think both sides agree that we want safety around schools, we want safety at non-profit organizations, we want safety around churches, I mean, just society in general. But what is the middle ground? And I think the middle ground is we all want the same thing, which is perhaps looking at it from a different perspective. So um, as you sort of reflect on what I've shared, I would love your views. Where is the middle ground now, right? Because people are going to be calling for firearms to be restricted, and I already saw this. Amy Klobuchar, one of the state senators here in Minnesota, I've already seen her on the news saying this has to stop. We need to take possession of these firearms, and I do, to a degree, understand her perspective as to where she's coming from. But the middle ground is we all want the same things. We all want safer schools, safer communities. So what does that look like going forward? I would love your views and opinions on this. A couple of things coming up I just want to tell you about. I have a partnership with Zero Eyes that do gun detection software. Really, really powerful tool. On the 4th of September, I believe it's Thursday, the 4th of September, I'm doing a case study about the Covenant school shooting down in Nashville. I believe that was in 2023 from the top of my head. I'm going to be walking us through that case study. That is a free webinar. I will share the link to that afterwards. On Tuesday, the 9th of September, one of my organizations, the Worship Security Academy, we do an online conference for non-profits and churches where we talk about safety and security. Dr. James Denzi from the Violence Project is going to be talking about the data in faith organizations, in church schools. If you cannot afford a ticket, do not let that be the barrier to entry. Send me a message here on LinkedIn. Send me a message via YouTube. You can send it to team@kingswoodsc.com, team@kingswoodsc.com. Dr. James Densley is going to be going through the data about mass shootings in private Christian educations and schools, Tuesday, the 9th of September. If money is a barrier to entry, I'm going to post the link where you can register. If money is a barrier to entry, drop me a message here on LinkedIn or send me a message on YouTube. I will gift you a ticket because I think we'd all agreed after today it's really, really important. So I just wanted to come in, just share a little bit about it because a lot of people are texting me and messaging me. Not everyone knows what happened here in Minneapolis. But as I leave, I want to remember the 2 children that went to school, a place that was designed to protect them, and they weren't kept safe. And we have to all take accountability now as to what can we do forward to make sure that when children go to school, they are safe. And also our prayers with those 17 other people that are injured, they are hurting, and some of those are still in a critical conditions. We also want to share our prayers for them. So drop your comments in below. It is a complex issue. It is a complex situation, but where is the common ground? I believe the common ground is on both sides. We all want the same thing. We want to save the community. The challenge is, what does that look like? So for now, you stay safe, have a blessed day, and I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.